Kia ora koutou. Welcome everyone to our webinar, Next Wave Online, what it really takes to scale a sustainable business. My name is James. I am the GM at the Sustainable Business Network, and it's a pleasure to take you through the next 45 minutes of this webinar. We'll start with a karakia. Tuta mai I runga, tuta mai I zaro, tuta mai I waho, tuta mai I roto, kia tō ai te mori tū, te mori ora ki te katoa, huie tai kia. Okay, this is what we'll be running through. First of all, I'll give a bit of context as to why we're here. I think that could be a useful start. We'll be then hearing the key insights from the Next Wave 2026 Barometer of Sustainable Innovation by the author of the report, Dr. Kate Prendergast, University of Canterbury. Then we'll be moving into hearing from real insights from the sustainable innovators of Dr. Jason Wargent from BioLumic, Scott Anderson from Borba Shoes. We'll then have a couple of minutes at the end, and I'll talk about one of SBN's responses, which is a Sustainable Business Fund, and then we'll follow up with some next steps. So that's the plan. We'll have there is a Q&A function available. We're quite tight on timing, so any questions on the barometer we can capture and endeavour to answer post-event, and then depending on how the discussion goes, we'd love to have some of your questions for Jason and Scott. Okay, but to start off, let's take a sort of different track, because a lot of sustainability conversations start off with what's wrong. But let's just take a couple of moments to read through some of those statements in terms of if there's anything that resonates with imagining an Aotearoa where those elements are true. And then if we imagine that this isn't a vision of a distant future, imagine there are parts of that future that already exist. Because of course, across Aotearoa, there are literally hundreds of businesses that are working to restore ecosystems. They're designing circular economy products. They're empowering clean and renewable energy and creating thriving local business communities. So I think, the question is not is this future possible, but it's how we can help the people building it scale faster. And of course, hundreds of these businesses enter the Sustainable Business Awards every year. It's open again now for this year's entries, and I'll talk about that later on in the webinar. And so they get to be judged as part of the next cohort, those businesses and organizations that are forming the next economy. And one of SBN's key strategic roles is to help scale, help those businesses thrive so that they and their products and solutions become the mainstream. And that in turn creates an economy that can deliver what we're seeing in those statements in front of you now. But of course, what we need to be able to do to help them scale is to understand them, where they are now, what are their needs, and how that's tracking over time. And that is the next wave of Barometer of Sustainable Innovation in Aotearoa New Zealand 2026. And it's a joint venture with the University of Canterbury. And so it's a pleasure to introduce the author of this year's report, Dr. Kate Prendergast, who's going to take you through some of the highlights. So welcome, Kate, and over to you. I'll stop sharing.
Kia ora. It's a pleasure to be here today. So hopefully my screen's popped up. So tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Kate Prendergast toko ingoa. Just as I begin, I would like to say a huge thanks to James Griffin, Rachel Brown, and the Sustainable Business Network. It's been such a privilege to be part of this collaboration. And I know I speak not only for myself, but also on behalf of my co-author, Associate Professor Joya Kemper. So for us, it's been really exciting seeing what's happening in the sustainable innovation space, but also to see where some of the challenges are and some of the opportunities. And so today I'm going to share some of those with you today. So when we look at the Next Wave Barometer, it's a snapshot of what's going on in Aotearoa New Zealand's purpose-driven sector. We've surveyed the innovators, the disruptors, the sustainable change makers. So the barometer, like James said, tracks sentiment, confidence, and success factors that are shaping sustainable innovation here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And today we're really excited to launch the 2026 Next Wave report. So for this report, we surveyed 42 finalists in the 2025 Sustainable Business Awards. And today, part of our role is to amplify their voices, to highlight where the opportunities are, but also the challenges they face so that we can collectively work together to address these. So like James said, we can imagine a different, more sustainable future. So when we look across the sustainable innovation sector, we see a sector that is optimistic, they're ambitious. 67% of respondents told us that they're confident about their growth prospects over the next year. So some of the key priorities for growth include growing business and market awareness, scaling operations, and launching new products and services. And I think this idea about launching new products and services is really exciting because these businesses do have new and innovative ideas. They are bringing products and services to market. So it's a really cool, innovative space to be in. But while we see that the sector is ambitious, we also know, and I know many of you here today will know, that it's a really hard space to be in at the moment. Sustainability is a very difficult operating environment during our current times. And so as one survey respondent said, it's a very hard space to be in right now, as culturally, Kiwis tend not to adopt new things readily. The government is not supporting environmental initiatives, and businesses are tightening their belts. And I think this quote encapsulates some of the challenges that the sustainable innovation sector is experiencing. So when we look at the key themes that have emerged from the survey, we see that they cluster around three key areas. So the first is around access to finance, the second is around policy instability, and the third challenge is around limited market awareness and adoption. And so I'm going to briefly touch on each of these challenges in my talk today, beginning with access to funding and capital. So in our report last year, we saw that access to funding was a pervasive challenge for many of the survey respondents. And we've seen that trend continue. So over 50% of the businesses sampled rated access to funding as difficult or very difficult. And because we know that this is such a challenging area for the sustainable innovation sector, this year we added a few more questions to the survey so that we could take a deeper dive into what's going on in the funding space. So many of the survey respondents are seeking more external capital, so around 75%. But when you look at this graph here, you can really see a picture of two stories. So at the bottom bar of the graph shows that around a quarter of the respondents are not seeking any external capital within the next 12 to 24 months. Then at the top of the graph, you can see that around another quarter of respondents are seeking over $5 million worth of external capital within the next 12 to 24 months. So when we ask them, well, what are you going to be using this capital for? What will it enable? The majority of businesses told us that it would enable product or technology development, market expansion or export, and it would allow them to scale operations or production. For many of these businesses, however, accessing, like I said before, capital is difficult. And so some of the barriers that we're really seeing within the sustainability space is that short-term investment horizons are incompatible with sustainability goals. Other key barriers are around lack of collateral or security. Respondents have also told us that investors are not familiar with sustainability models. And there's often this misalignment between investor expectations and mission impact. And that's really important for businesses and for operators within that positive impact space, is to have funding that does align with your vision and mission. But in positive news, when capital is secured, it is often from funders with good mission alignment. So for around 3/4 of the survey respondents, they reported that current investors or funders do understand and they do value their sustainability mission. So that's pretty important, and that's pretty cool to see that some of these organisations are finding this alignment. We asked participants, well, what kind of funding would be most useful right now? And participants indicated that if there was more patient or flexible capital, like longer term loans or repayments linked to revenue, over 50% of respondents would be likely to apply for this sort of capital. And so I think it's really encouraging to see some of the work that the Sustainable Business Network is doing in this space. And I'm sure James and the Sustainable Business Network team will talk about that later on in our webinar. So moving on from funding and capital, the second key theme that we've seen consistently emerge over the next wave barometers is around policy and stability. For our respondents, they expressed both through quantitative or numbered survey responses and also through written comments that they find policy instability really frustrating, the flip-flopping between different governments and the overall lack of support in the sustainability space. So just 18% of survey respondents indicated that the current policy and regulatory environment is supportive or very supportive of their business model. So just 18%. Stability and predictability remain ongoing concerns, with many of our respondents calling for a more enabling regulatory and policy environment. So the final area that I just wanted to touch on today before wrapping up is around limited market awareness and adoption of sustainability offerings. So we see from our survey respondents that customer demand and awareness is a critical challenge facing just over half of the businesses we surveyed, so around 52%. And I think these statistics on this slide paint quite an interesting picture. So we see that 60% of respondents reported moderate or significant growth, yet just 14% of our respondents indicated that there was high or very high customer awareness of their offerings. And so this indicates that there might be a need to increase reach and tap more into mainstream markets with sustainability offerings and innovations. Up here you can see kind of some of the frustration expressed by respondents in their comments around market awareness and adoption of sustainability offerings. So on the left-hand side, one of the respondents said, getting connected to customers is critical. Celebrating sustainable offerings in itself does not always get the right message to the right people or organisations. Another respondent said that until we value the negative impact of a product or service on the environment over the long term, procurement choices will largely remain focused on the lowest cost. And so for us, we see a need to improve visibility, improve education, and improve storytelling around sustainable innovations. And that's part of what we're trying to do today. So overall, what the results show us is that the sustainable innovation sector is ambitious and optimistic, and there is confidence, but there are some of these key structural constraints limiting their ability to grow and scale their impact. So today, what we're calling on is 4 key actions to accelerate impact and to hopefully create those possible futures that James asked us to imagine. So the first key action is to unlock fit for purpose, long horizon finance. And the Sustainable Business Network is doing some fantastic work in this space. The second is to create a stable and enabling policy environment. So whether that's in our organisations or advocating for policy settings that support sustainable innovation at local, regional and national levels, that's a really important space to be in. The third area is around building mainstream customer demand and awareness, whether that's raising the profile of sustainable innovations in our day-to-day lives, or more importantly, through procurement processes where we can have scale and impact. And then the final action is around building capability, infrastructure and partnerships, because if we work collectively together, we are more likely to be able to have the impact that creates a more sustainable future for people and planet. And so today I'm calling on you to stand with the innovators. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Kate, for all that work putting it together and then distilling it so eloquently in those few minutes. And yes, who will stand with the innovators? Yes, great call to action. So now we are going to hear from 2 of the innovators, and it's a pleasure to welcome to the screen. We have Scott from Orba Choose and Jason from BioLumic, and we're going to have a discussion about where they currently are, what they've achieved, and importantly, what are some of the barriers and opportunities around what they can achieve going forward. So here they are. Welcome, Jason. Welcome, Scott. Fantastic you joined us. Thanks so much for your time. I know you're extremely busy running your businesses, so really appreciate that. So we'll crack straight into it, and I'll sort of ask the first question, and that'll give you a chance to sort of introduce yourselves as well. But so what future are you trying to help create through your business? And maybe let's go to Jason first.
Yeah, sure. Kia ora, James, and kia ora to everyone. It's great to be here. In terms of what BioLumic's trying to achieve, we're working in agriculture, agricultural technology. We're a science company. And so we see a future where the full potential, and we're focused on the plant, on crops, but using the full potential of our natural capital in agriculture can be used. When you look at the history of agriculture, there's been a lot of great innovations over time. Many of those faced through the sustainability lens. Many of them are also facing through trying to achieve clear, simple tasks like increasing crop yields and reducing their vulnerability to pests and diseases and the challenges of growing crops. So that does mean that, of course, and everyone will be aware of many of the headlines that are out there when it comes to agriculture. We've had quite a few physical innovations in the history of agriculture. So along with breeding, we've also had the use of agrochemicals, genetic modification, and not to put any of these innovations in a particular box, but there's a lot of external applications of technology in agriculture. In BioLumic, we're convinced that the next great frontier is to actually really use what the plant has itself. And our technology, we have invented a way to use applications of light to seeds in order to activate their potential in terms of yield and other traits that are valued. We're doing that by telling the plant to do things with the genetic background, the resources it already has. So the big frontier for us is getting crops that already exist and all the future crops that we breed or develop to do those things for themselves by us giving them the right instructions to do so. And that could be, we believe, one of these next great frontiers in agriculture, unlocking full natural potential of crops, which will lead to the achievement of many goals that we seek in terms of sustainability in agriculture, because many of the traits, many of the characteristics we can unlock overlap with sustainable goals, inducing a plant to change its composition so that an animal that eats it emits less methane, getting its roots to grow more so that it needs less nutrients to be applied to it. And that's what we're after here. So use that natural capital to achieve sustainable goals.
Brilliant. So using natural capital to create the next great frontier in agriculture. Love it. Thank you. We'll obviously come back and keep the discussion going. But over to Scott. Maybe if you can paint a picture of your vision through Auber.
So the question was, what's the future for the business? The vision for Auber is very much based in the 5 co-founders, where the principal co-founder has been making shoes since 1962 as a shoe engineer, and realised about 10 years ago, over time, that the shoe industry was one of the most polluting in the world. The average life of a shoe after disposal is about 200 years. We make 24 billion a year. So before a pair of 200-year waste Nikes has biodegraded or left the earth, if that waste was in Olympic swimming pools, the line of pools would go 2.5 times around the earth. So shoe waste alone, as 1/30th of the size of all synthetic waste, will be hugely detrimental to planetary health and human life. So 10 years ago, we set about addressing that by developing materials which would biodegrade on disposal. So, and without compromising the use of the product, durability, comfort, style. We had the ability to do that with Marshall, because Marshall is known as grandfather of the Indonesian footwear industry, which now employs about 1 million people. Now, very briefly, these industries, they don't want to pollute, but if their customers, like Nike, ask them to make shoes that pollute and will only pay them for it, they'll do what they're told. So we've designed a range of biodegradable shoes and biodegradable product without compromising style that will biodegrade at the end of their life. To do that, that's our mission. We have had a bit of mission creep lately, in that we're now moving some of our materials developments more into not just solving the problem of synthetic waste from shoes, but solving the problem of synthetic waste from all sorts of synthetics. And MPI are helping us to do that with government grants. So the future we're trying to create with our business is solve this massive problem that just must be solved. And when you solve a problem, you can make a lot of money.
Well, absolutely. Well, I mean, so while we're with you, Scott, do you want to just briefly say, tell us about some of the traction you've achieved to date up until this stage, and there's some sort of highlights to give a flavour of where you are currently as Auber Shoes, and then we'll go on to next stage?
Fundamentally, we still have been for over 6 years, fundamentally in advanced materials development. So I spend quite a bit of my time dealing with PhD level scientists in Taiwan on rubber materials development and test. Every material gets tested in between 18 and 40 different dimensions. But while we've been testing and developing, we've also been selling shoes just out of New Zealand. It's easy to solve a problem, a quality problem in New Zealand. It's pretty difficult if you're in the US. So we've put over 8,000 pairs of Orba shoes on people's feet.
That's good. And I certainly see them around Auckland.
We have some significant product developments on the way. We can't really talk about them as I'm just in the process of lodging the patents. In terms of the main problem we've had, we raised $2.5 million in capital. So that's been the expenditure. A similar company out of San Diego has achieved, we think, about half the product development that we've achieved. And they received funding of $25 million from the US, from the California government. That puts New Zealand and what we're able to do in New Zealand and out of Indonesia into context with the way they work in the US. They had 25 million bucks. They've achieved about half what we've achieved for a tenth the price.
Goodness. Okay, so it's value for money on this side of the world. But I think we're going to come back to that sort of finance sort of question shortly as well, though. But back to you, Jason, in terms of where's BioLumic at the moment? What have been some of your achievements to date?
Yeah, we've had some really exciting, sort of mind-blowing inflection points in the business in the last few years, actually. You can imagine we're heavily an R&D company. We're building the ability to control these traits, and then we're working with partners, seed companies, and so on to take them to market. They're ultimately our customer, and the farmer is their customer. So in the last 2 or 3 years, just last year, actually, we launched our first commercial scale treatment of seeds, or light activation of seeds. That's in the United States. That's with corn. We had a breakthrough just 6 months before that, where we discovered that if you apply our technology to the seeds that are used to grow plants to make the seeds that the seed companies sell, that we actually discovered the inheritance of our science, that our traits can be inherited from one generation of seeds to the next, which immediately, from a scaling perspective, drops the amount of seed we have to treat by 100-fold. So applying to fewer seeds, make seeds from the seeds. And we also saw some really amazing results. We're talking about a maximum outcome of increasing the yield of corn by plus 77% in replicated field trials in the United States. So I had this string of breakthroughs, also honing in on the diagnostic tests that we have to do with every variety of seed we work with to be able to choose what treatment of light we should give. So we had a breakthrough with the have to go to market diagnostic test, making it quick and easy to do. A breakthrough with the ability to scale. Treating all the world's seeds requires a lot of equipment. If we can drastically reduce the amount of seeds we have to treat because we're going up a generation, then that's another great breakthrough. And launching commercially. We've also done a few development deals as well, where we are being funded by a partner to develop a trait in a new crop. And so far we've done this in rice, and we've also done this in ryegrass in New Zealand. So we've had this great full circle journey back to New Zealand with some of our development work as well, which we're now being funded to do, which is a great step, because then we're not going around thinking, well, what crop shall we develop on? 1 million crops in the world. We are now supported through partnerships in our funding to actually do so.
That's amazing. That's great. So, real progress being made. Because I suppose in terms of the, there's a question around the barriers to scaling. Sounds like maybe you're overcoming those potential barriers by the partnership and getting investment, or is there Is that the case?
Yeah, I think those inflection points have been really huge for us. Our technology, I would sort of simply liken it to when we're deciding what regimen of light has to be given to a certain crop. It's not like walking into a room and there's two light switches on the wall and do we turn light switch A or B on? It's like walking into a room with 20,000 light switches on the wall, and we have to work out through science which switches to press. So having a rapid test that can tell you that is hugely important to us. Otherwise, it means, and it kind of cuts to your question really, to scale in our space, you have to prove that or anybody's space, you have to prove your product has value. For us, that means proving it works. Our technology does what we say to a partner it's going to do. Anyone who's ever gone anywhere near science or agriculture will know that, this is turning up the difficult dial, especially for those of us, everyone here who's probably watching too. You are probably one of the first people to do that thing. You're not the 40th person to do that thing. And if you're one of the first people to ever do that thing, your provability requirements, the bar you have to reach before you get to scale, is incredibly high. So you have to convince people that what you're talking about isn't magic. And you can only really do that by showing that your product works or your product does what you're saying it can do. And for every entrepreneur, there's that journey. It's the uniqueness, though. You're doing something very hard, and you're doing something where the provability bar is very high. And you're doing it, of course, on far less capital than an already established revenue generating business. And so it's that equation of difficulty that you have to climb over and take the little wins and obviously the setbacks as you go through that journey, I think.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So there's a few things that innovators like yourself are battling against versus the incumbents. So, Scott, is that some similar experience to yourself in terms of the key barriers and to scale?
We have a totally different business model from Jason's, so not really. So his business has to be extremely robust in that they're selling technology on a large scale. Ours really has to have a great story behind it, and we've got that in spades. And now, as we've been proving our product, our expansion model is of great benefit, and it's good for the sustainability world. So it's a international Kickstarter campaign fundamentally, where people will get. We trialled it in New Zealand through Anna Gunther at Pledge Me, and pre-sold about 600 pairs of shoes on a small trial. We can replicate that globally at not much cost. Have people buy into the story, have people look at this first generation of product that we've got, and we're pretty sure that that's a safe commercial bet in terms of scaling, but it still has to get paid for. And whereas the funding environment in New Zealand, we found it very easy in the early days post-COVID, we found it extremely difficult and time consuming. So the time we should be spending developing our product and developing our commercial base and doing a global pre-launch, instead we spend trying to talk to investors.
Well, actually, I mean that might build on a question that's come from the Good Sense team. So thank you. Talking about asking, really, is it harder for local innovations to get traction in New Zealand versus overseas? If anyone has Jason or Scott, a view on that. I mean, there's probably multiple factors, including sample markets at split date.
I think there's two parts to that question. Is it hard for a local New Zealand company to get traction in New Zealand, or a local New Zealand company to get traction overseas? And then we can flip it for international companies coming to New Zealand. I think it's pretty much the same. If you've got a good product and a good story, you'll get traction. They're providing you can pay your bills and do your development and do your marketing and pay Google as you're doing it. So, which just goes hand in hand with traction and business growth. I've always thought traction and success overseas often helps with traction and success in your local market. So if you can tell a good story about how you've got 10,000 orders out of the US, then maybe the locals will buy it a bit more quickly. We have a tangible product, so people can touch it, feel it, put it on their shoes, watch the reviews. So I don't think that's such a problem for us. It's just,
How about you, Jason? Is it sort of local versus overseas? Obviously, you've got some traction in the States.
Yeah, I think, we've seen all sides of the coin, really. I think we were founded in Palmerston North, and very quickly in our history, we started working with local potential customers in the very early days. We were extremely pre-product as we see it today, very, very early. We sort of went on this development journey through partnerships, but we were never, as a science company, sort of locked away in the ivory tower. We worked with companies from the get-go, and then ended up in the States and many other places besides. And the States is absolutely in the markets we're in, like corn, for example, extremely important. We've had investment, substantial investment from US-based and other overseas investors. We've had substantial and great support from New Zealand investors, and not in a complete order. We had seed investment locally in New Zealand to begin with, etc., pre-major venture round investment, and we've had venture investment from both sides of the Pacific since then. And yeah, I think I somewhat agree with Scott in the sense of what are the difficulties or the trade-offs. I mean, I think, when you are in your own backyard, you get certain advantages there. We've certainly had tremendous support from the New Zealand government. Callaghan and MB, etc., have helped, support the company up through till now. We've had less of that, let's call it public funding in the States comparably, although we have a US company as well as a New Zealand company. On the capital side, it's a bit of a depends answer in the sense of people do want to know who you are, where you are. In the States, folks are motivated, I think, often by the fact that our CEO is based in the United States. We have a team based in the United States. I think it's different a little bit, somewhat, before we had team in the States. So it's sort of a horses for courses answer.
Right.
That we've been able to come back to New Zealand with say our trait development, where we've then been able to use our success from here and into overseas to come back and then show that there's a robustness to the technology to then be able to bring it back to dairy farms. So we've sort of done the whole circle there, really.
Great. Well, thanks so much for these insights. And I think we've probably got time for just one more, and this is sort of a quick response to this question, which is just focusing from a personal level, focusing on mental well-being and how does entrepreneurs, founders like yourself, balance your well-being with life in business? Just a quick thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, happy to go first. As I speak to you now, I'm drowned in jet lag, having got back from Europe on Sunday, straight into the office Monday. I personally actually viewed aspects of the itinerary I had in Europe last week as it was different to what I do day to day. I was at an event related to a prize we were a finalist for, and it almost felt like a holiday, just a break from sort of other things we've been doing. We've just gone through a couple of months of capital raising, easily the most challenging capital raise we've ever gone through, I'd say, as a company, and we've done many. But your real question, it is very hard. We talk about it a lot in our company, and we keep an eye on each other. But those who are in that spot, particularly founders, or those working closely with founders, those who are really passionate team members in your business, which is hopefully many of them, it is an incredibly hard thing to do. And yet, ironically, I mean, if someone showed me the exit door tomorrow to not be on a very, very hard journey like this, I wouldn't be able to do it, because you have that sense of trying to achieve something that's truly valuable to the planet, to humanity. So it's incredibly hard, but it's almost like, once you've been shown the sweet jar on the top shelf of the candy store, in a way, in terms of what you can contribute to, it's very hard for your mind and your life to turn elsewhere, but it owns you, your journey owns you. And I think that's the thing, the advice I would give, which is easier said than done to founders, is you really do have to put as many miles in as possible in trying to keep some sort of separation with, time with your family. Again, we often say it's easy to say, but the more time you put into that, I think the better. And every founder will have their moments where they're not doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, great advice. I think once you've seen it, you can't be unseen, I suppose, with that potential. Scott, any final thoughts?
And encapsulated that very well. For me, we're on a mission. We just have to solve these problems. So there is no choice. Someone has to stand up and solve them. And that's what people like Jason are doing, and companies like Auber are doing, and the other businesses today. We're solving problems. So once you've started on the road, you can't stop. There's no choice.
There we go. Momentum is there. It sounds like part of the deal, but please do look after yourselves, as we need you guys to pull through and bring these solutions to the fore. So really appreciate both of your time, answering these questions very candidly, and all the best with future endeavours, and we'll be there providing support however we can, and I'm sure everyone on the call will be as well. So thank you so much.
Cheers, James.
Now,
thank you, James.
Pleasure, thank you. So I'm just going to finish off with a couple of things now. Just go back to sharing my slides, because what I want to just address is one of the responses that SBN is working on to help scale some of these innovators, get them to the next level so the impacts can be felt. And that is a sustainable business fund. There are literally hundreds of businesses that are creating positive impacts for Aotearoa. And for many of them, they're stranded in terms of finance. They are not necessarily fit for venture capital funding, as they are not a deep tech company, perhaps like BioLumic, and they're also still relatively new. And as we heard from Kate, that many funders don't really understand sustainable business models, which is staggering, but that's what we're hearing. So to unlock that impact, SBN is working to establish a fund that would provide growth loans to revenue generating businesses, flexible terms, reduced collateral, importantly, wraparound support, and of course, impact measurement. And it's built on the national pipeline of vetted businesses from our awards. Now, the impact, if we could unlock growth in hundreds of these businesses, is amazing, across climate to resilience. And so we're really keen to help unlock that impact. And to do so, we do need some support. We need some philanthropic donation to be able to establish and run the fund until it starts to wash its face in terms of funding itself. And we have a target of 250k to do that. We have 80k today, which is good, but not enough. So if anyone knows anyone or is interested themselves in being one of the founding supporters of this fund, please reach out to myself or Rachel. Other news, the Sustainable Business Awards is open for 2026, and we recognise that it does take an ecosystem to transition the economy. And so in addition to the Disruptive Innovation and Transformational Leadership Award, we want to profile and support those organisations who are providing finance to these organisations. Who are those companies procuring and incubating those companies in the Market Mover Award? And also, who's communicating the change that we need, as well as regenerating nature and collaborating. Free to enter, open to anyone, simple process. Please tell everyone you think is deserved of an award to enter. And then some notice of the next fest happening in March 2027, which is an opportunity to really, where we're bringing systems together to help collectively scale the next economy faster, building on the pioneers that we'll be featuring at our awards. So that's pretty much it for this lunchtime webinar. Hope it's been interesting. We will be sending links for you to be able to download the Next Wave report, so that'll be coming through in your inboxes this afternoon. Other things we'd love you to do is, of course, enter the Sustainable Business Awards or tell someone else to. Play your role in scaling sustainable innovation. We're all citizens, we're all procurers, consumers, so let's do what we can to help those innovations succeed. We'd love you to donate to the Sustainable Business Fund establishment if that's an opportunity. So thank you again. Thank you particularly to Kate and the work and her colleague Joya have done in producing the Next Wave report. To Scott and Jason for taking time out to share their stories, and for you for taking time out of your lunch hour to listen to this. We'll close with a karakia. Unahia, unahia, unahia ki tu uru tahunu, te wātia, te mama tenaka. Te tinana, te warua, kiti ala tangata, koirai rong. Wake ihia, ake ki runga, ki a tina, puie, tai kia. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Europe.